Ice, ice, baby. Hello again, Generation 1 Transformer fans. This is Sparkster1701, and we're going to kick off Pretender Month with one of the Pretender monsters that appeared near the end of the line. This is Icepick. Now, Icepick was released in 1989 and was one of the 6 figures that was needed to build the last combiner in the American line, Monstructor. They would only be available in 1989 and would be discontinued for 1990, and we really did not get a replacement for Icepick in 1990. The Pretender monsters were a small attempt to be a throwback to the Constructicons and their combined unit of Devastator, in the fact that the Pretender monsters, like the Constructicons, they each formed an individual component to Monstructor and could not be switched around. Although in Monstructor's case, the arms could be interchanged with each other, as could the legs. We're going to take a look at Icepick, the robot, here first. So we're going to move the shell out of the way, and we'll take a look at it in a moment. So we'll bring Icepick up here close to the camera so everybody can get a good look at him, since he is pretty small for a robot. As his robot, he like his Pretender monster buddies, they would get reissued shortly after they were discontinued as Monstructor in Japan. They would get recolored and be given new names and be part of the very rare Dino Force series of Decepticons. And that is a much sought after item by many of the American collectors. As far as articulation goes, he's got pretty little. You can basically rotate his arm at the elbow, so he can point it straight out, and if you really want to, he can go all the way back. Put the other arm to match it, and here we go, dancing or something. Yeah, we won't go there. The next closest thing that he has is that he can bend at the knee, but since it's more for his transformation, it really doesn't serve any purpose whatsoever. Consequently, due to his small size, it also means that transforming Icepick here is really a simple task. Basically, we start by, of course, taking his gun away from him. Add to the pile down here. And next, we fold both of his arms so that they are pointing straight down. We fold down his robot head. His head's kind of stiff, so you got to be gentle. Although not as gentle as on many of his Pretender monster buddies that suffer from gold plastic syndrome. And then lastly, take the bottom of his legs, rotate them all the way around, and then you have his monster form. But due to the small size that he is, there really isn't any way to tell what in the world he is supposed to be. So, if you've got a theory, fans, please mention it down in the comments, because I think that's the running gag with him and the Pretender monsters. Nobody knows what they're supposed to be. Could be doing some thinking about it, but seeing as it's raining outside, I think somebody else is doing the thinking. Now to put him into his Pretender shell. Getting him ready for that is a snatch due to how he is. All you got to do is, once you have him here in monster mode, is just Fold his arms up so they're straight. Unlike many of the other Pretenders that are available, the Pretender monsters used a somewhat rubbery one-piece shell, which we'll take a closer look at here in just a moment. But these shells are all one solid piece and they are rubberized, so you'll definitely want to check it for wear, because the paint on these does wear off a bit and is easily damaged. But also, due to the fact of the way they're made, some models do tend to get spotty, which looks like little bits of mold growing on them, or they feel like they're secreting a rather sticky or gooey resin. So they are kind of disgusting to handle. But sometimes, like this version of Icepick here, you can find one that is in pretty good shape. Alright, to get him inside, all you have to do is turn him around, turn the shell around, and just work him into this hole in his back. He goes in relatively easily. And then you would take the rear panel of the unit, snug it into the bottom, and then just clip it in at the top to make sure it connects. You can take his gun and attach it to this notch that's here on both sides of the backpack. Doesn't really matter which. And the last little detail, you can attach the backpack onto the posts on the panel. And there you go. Icepick is now in his Pretender shell. The biggest downside to these shells being made of rubber is there is no articulation. So he just stands there. Guess you can call him a rubber paperweight or something. But when you take a good close look at him, it does look like that he is an ice monster of some sort. So, give Takara and Hasbro some credit on him for making him look like he does come out of a glacier. Let's take a look now at the loose parts that Icepick comes with. For starters, we'll take a good close look at the shell. Like I said earlier, it does not move or anything. But you'll definitely want to check it for any signs of wear. And this also allows you to get a good view of the back side of the shell and the interior. This shell, unlike most of them out there, is in pretty good shape. It's not got moldy spots on it, nor is it secreting any fluids, so this one's a good one. I hope all of you that are searching for an Icepick figure find one that's also in just as good of shape. Probably the hardest piece to find here is his gun, or rifle as it's listed. The tech specs call it a fireball bazooka, which may be a bit of a stretch, especially since bazookas in military terms have long been obsolete in the US military prior to the Transformer toy line. This looks more like your basic ordinary pistol. Far cry from a bazooka, but it is at least a little nicely detailed and does have a nice little sight there at the end of it. Looks the same on the back side. If you can imagine, this piece is pretty hard to find on the market. Here's his backpack piece. As you might notice as well, it looks like a foot. This is one of the foot stands for Monstructor. As you might have guessed, Icepick forms a leg to Monstructor, so he comes with a foot stand. This also doubles as a backpack for the Pretender mode. You can see there's nothing on the back side of it. Doesn't really matter if this is the right foot or the left foot. Icepick is shown in many of the instructions and whatnot to be the right foot, but he can be the left one if you would prefer that. So, The foot, this piece will also be the exact same on his counterpart, Scowl, who forms the left leg. So their feet are the same. That should help if you're looking for loose parts. And then lastly, we have his rear panel. This one is unique to Icepick. All 6 of them have their own back panels, or rear panels as it's said. There's nothing really fancy about it. It's just to close up the back of the shell. It's got these 2 posts here to connect the foot to it. And of course you got a little C-notch here to connect the gun to it. It's the same on the other side. And that's what it looks like on the inside of it. It's molded specifically so that his feet will fit in here when it's attached to the back. By a semi-stroke of dumb luck, which does occur to me very frequently on this collection, I have managed to obtain a card backer for Icepick. Back the camera up and adjust it here. It's not in the best of shape, but you can at least get a good look at how they were sold back in 1989. He was retailed. This one came from KB Toys, and he sold for about $6. Turn it over here to the back side, and it shows you here, instead of the mural from the older ones, this just shows all 6 components that you will need to build Monstructor. Icepick here was listed as number 1 in the line. There's a crude drawing of him in his shell. We'll come over here to this side. It has the robot point. He was worth 1 point, despite the fact that by 1989 the promotional mail-aways were done for the Transformers. It starts with a set includes to have just the shell and the robot. Then it moves over here, showing the footstand backpack and his gun and the sticker sheet. It just does not show the rear panel until you're actually on the instruction part to put it on him. Shot of how to arm the gun on him. And then quickly how to turn him into a monster. And then now how to get him ready to be hidden. And how to put him into the shell. This is the only spot where the rear panel here even gets mentioned. And then here's the last spot where it shows you how to put the stickers on him. It's interesting that these little guys came with stickers, but the small Pretenders that were also released that year did not come with stickers. And we come down here to his tech spec, and as you can see, they changed things up a bit for them in 1989, as instead of having the whole bar as purple, they only put it above the picture to indicate he is a Decepticon, and the picture it uses is typical of those of Pretenders, having the shell, the robot, and the alternate mode. It's basically the same picture that would be shown here, provided the previous owner hadn't destroyed it, getting him out of the package. It gives his name as Icepick, and his function is demolitions. His motto is, "From today's rubble-strewn fields shall emerge a new Decepticon world." A fanatical follower of planned obsolescence, this metallic monster preaches about the destruction of things today so they can be recycled into more advanced technologies tomorrow. His outer shell can withstand virtually any explosion. His claws can pierce through 12 inches of pure-grade steel and crush a tank without even trying. Enclosed creature robot has a leaping range of 1.8 miles, armed with fireball bazooka. Now, planned obsolescence, as it mentions here, is an idea that has long been around. The idea of it is basically to make products intentionally so that they break down in a relatively short amount of time, thus paving a need to get new things. The idea was first brought about when cars were first being manufactured, nearly 100 years ago. As the idea that the auto industry had was that they would make the cars so that they would break apart and fail within a year or so, thus forcing the consumer market to have to buy one next year. Unfortunately, as this plan does tend to create a lot of waste, as we see now, as there are so many disposable electronics available that only last 1 year or until however long you can use them and then throw them away. The idea is slowly falling out of favor due to the environmental concerns that this causes. Taking a look over here at his tech specs, you can see that instead of the grid where it required the decoder, we now have a horizontal bar graph, which is somewhat easier to read, and it saved Hasbro the expense of having to print off massive amounts of those decoders. It gives his strength as 8, his intelligence is 7, his speed is 3, his endurance is 8, his rank is 6, his courage is 8, and both his firepower and his skill are 6. So aside from being a little bit on the slow side, he's just barely about above average in terms of being a functional warrior. Now, the specs mentioned of his devotion to planned obsolescence. But Icepick here also takes it further in the fact that he takes it as all more of being an ideological zealot and practically worships it as if it's the next promised thing to happen in our world. Thus, this makes him unknowingly a propaganda tool, and he has been somewhat successful in recruiting others to the Decepticon cause with his preaches about how the Decepticons, are going to destroy the worlds and build onto them a new Decepticon world. While his success on that has been rather limited, the Decepticon Command does seem to appreciate the effort that he does put into it. Probably because none of them wants to think about how they're going to recruit others, so it's easier to let somebody else do it. On the downside, though, while he may believe what he preaches, he's not always entirely convinced of the more ruthless Decepticon tactics, especially if they involve killing unsuspecting victims. So apparently he does have some moral compassions regarding his actions. Now we get down to what do I think of him. I think Icepick's a rather fascinating character. His devotion to destruction, while that does fit in with the Decepticons' motives and such, the way he goes about it is somewhat different, and that does warrant a little bit of appreciation. It does show a sign of originality in a time when the Transformer tech specs were starting to get rather on the stale and boring side. As a toy, though, he is on the disappointing side, as are a lot of the other Pretender monsters. There's the low articulation for the robot is disappointing, and the total lack of articulation on the shell is also a downer. But since it did expand upon the Pretender concept and still gave us a fairly decent combiner at the end, they're still worth looking at. As for where to place him on the tier, I would probably go with somewhere in the middle tier. He's certainly not great enough to be up on the top tier by any means, but he's not bad enough to be at the bottom. The toy is somewhat lacking, but with a little imagination to go with how his character is presented, he can be an interesting asset to one's collection. And thus, this concludes my review of the Generation 1 Pretender Monster Demolitions Icepick. If you like the video, please thumbs up it here on YouTube. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button down below, post a comment, and share this video with your friends and fellow collectors. This is Sparkster1701 saying catch y'all later for our next round of Pretender Month. Hey, think we can get a job getting on Frozen 2?